Welcome back to Rare CoinX PRO. Today we are exploring 4 magnificent Lincoln wheat pennies that span one of the most dramatic and consequential chapters in American history, the years immediately before and during World War II, a time when America was growing, changing, preparing for the unthinkable, and ultimately fighting the greatest conflict the modern world had ever seen. These 4 coins, the 1940, 1941, 1942, and 1944 no-mint mark Philadelphia pennies, each carry a story that goes far beyond their 1-cent face value, and in the right condition, the right variety, or with the right error, any one of them can command prices that will genuinely take your breath away. Stay with us all the way to the end because our final coin carries an error variety with an auction record that belongs in a class of its own. Let's start with our first coin, the 1940 no-mint mark Lincoln wheat penny. To hold a 1940 Lincoln wheat penny in your hand is to hold a coin from the last year of innocence before everything changed. In 1940, the United States was officially at peace, though the thunder of war was building across both the Atlantic and the Pacific in ways that most Americans could sense but few wanted to fully acknowledge. Franklin Roosevelt was running for an unprecedented third term as president. The economy was recovering from the Great Depression with gathering momentum. And at the Philadelphia Mint, the presses were running at a pace that reflected all of that growing economic energy. During 1940, the Philadelphia Mint produced a staggering 586,810,000 Lincoln cents, the highest volume among the 3 active mints that year. Nearly 587 million coins from a single facility in a single calendar year. That enormous figure tells you everything you need to know about the commercial energy of pre-war America, and it also sets the stage for understanding how the collector market for this coin works, because with nearly 600 million pieces entering circulation, virtually every American who handled money in 1940 touched one of these coins without ever thinking twice about it. When it comes to history and condition, the 1940 Philadelphia cent occupies a wonderfully interesting position in the pre-war wheat cent series. Philadelphia's 1940 strikes were generally well executed, so completely red gem specimens turn up more often here than at some other mints and years, and about 6,000 of the estimated 12,000 survivors grade MS 65 or better. That survival estimate is a sobering reminder of what 8 decades of circulation does to even the most abundantly produced coins. Out of nearly 587 million pieces, only around 12,000 are believed to survive in uncirculated condition today, and only half of those meet the gem quality standard that collectors prize most. What you are hunting for when examining a 1940 Philadelphia cent is a coin that has escaped all of that attrition, one where Lincoln's hair above the ear still shows each individual strand with sculptural precision, where the cheekbone retains its full 3-dimensional contour rather than the flat smoothness of handling, and where the wheat stalks on the reverse carry crisp, individually readable grains from top to bottom. The color spread on pricing is dramatic. A red specimen hit $14,950 in MS 68 condition in 2006, while a red-brown example topped out at $518 in MS 64, and a brown coin brought $805 in MS 62, illustrating with perfect clarity how color designation can transform the same grade into a completely different value proposition. The background and composition of this coin connects it to one of the great design traditions in American numismatic history. In 1940, the U.S. mints produced a total of 781,140,000 pennies across all 3 facilities, and the Philadelphia issue, struck without any mint mark beneath the date, is the most common of the 3 varieties. The coin is composed of 95% copper with 5% tin and zinc, giving it a weight of 3.11 grams across a 19mm diameter, with that warm, reddish copper glow that makes well-preserved wheat cents so visually appealing. Victor David Brenner's Lincoln portrait on the obverse carries, "In God We Trust," arching above and "Liberty," standing to the left, while the reverse shows those 2 elegant wheat stalks framing 1 cent, and E pluribus unum. And the Philadelphia Mint did something particularly special for collectors in 1940. The Philadelphia Mint struck only 15,872 proof pennies in 1940, making this by far the rarest variety of the year, produced using polished dies and planchets and creating mirror-like surfaces not found on regular business strikes. 15,872 proofs out of nearly 587 million regular strikes. That contrast is extraordinary, and those proof examples represent some of the most beautiful expressions of the Lincoln cent design ever produced. Collector demand for the 1940 no-mint mark penny is healthy and approachable at every level. Entry-level collectors find circulated examples affordable and historically meaningful, a genuine piece of pre-war American commerce that anyone can own for a very modest sum. Intermediate collectors hunting for gem-red, uncirculated examples find a satisfying challenge that rewards patience and a sharp eye. And at the very top of the market, the conditional rarity of truly gem-red survivors creates genuine competitive excitement. Collectors are always on the lookout for double die error features showing noticeable doubling of the date or lettering on the obverse side, which can be worth $50 to several $100s depending on visibility, giving eagle-eyed collectors an additional and genuinely achievable reason to examine every 1940 Philadelphia cent they encounter. For current market value, a 1940 wheat penny is worth about $130,000 to $310,000 in circulated condition, with common uncirculated examples typically ranging from about $520,000 to $710,000 or more depending on color and grade. The MS-68 examples can have a high value of $993,000 to $1.10 million or more, while the highest auction sale found is $1.50 million for a 1940 Philadelphia Lincoln cent graded MS-68, sold in 2006. $14,950 for a single 1-cent piece from 1940. That is the reward waiting for the collector who finds a true gem survivor from that pre-war production run. For collectors pursuing this date, the most important tip is to embrace the cherry-picking challenge with genuine enthusiasm. The 1940 wheat penny is an attractive coin that is worth the effort to cherry-pick and find one that is well-struck and is appealing overall. Study the specific areas where strike weakness or surface problems most commonly appear on this date. Always examine under proper daylight balanced lighting rather than warm incandescent light, which can make copper look redder than it truly is, and never clean or wipe a coin no matter how tempting it might seem, since cleaning permanently destroys the numismatic value of copper coins in ways that are immediately apparent to any experienced collector or grading service. Now let's move on to our second coin, the 1941 no-mint mark Lincoln wheat penny. Our second coin today carries a distinction that makes every serious collector of the pre-war Lincoln cent series pause and take notice. The 1941 Philadelphia penny is the coin from the year that American coinage crossed a threshold it had never crossed before, and it did so with a number so large it still feels almost impossible to comprehend. 1941 marked the first time any U.S. coin topped 1 billion pieces in a single year, and Philadelphia was the driving force behind that record. In 1941, the Philadelphia branch minted 887,018,000 coins, the largest mintage of all three facilities, making the 1941 no-mint mark penny the most common variety of the year by an enormous margin. Denver added 128,700,000 and San Francisco contributed 92,360,000, bringing the total across all three mints to over 1.1 billion pennies in a single calendar year. 1 billion Lincoln cents in 12 months. The American economy was running at full speed in 1941, driven by defense spending as the country began to prepare for a conflict it was increasingly clear could not be avoided. The historical context of 1941 is one of the most charged and emotionally significant years in American history. For most of the year, the United States maintained its official neutrality even as the war in Europe and Asia intensified. Then, on the 7th of December 1941, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor changed everything in a single morning, and America was at war. The pennies struck in Philadelphia in 1941 circulated through both sides of that historical boundary, before and after Pearl Harbor, passing through the hands of Americans who were living through one of the most transformative moments their nation had ever experienced. These coins carry the classic 95% copper composition that would vanish by 1943, meaning the 1941 Philadelphia penny is among the last of the traditional bronze wheat cents before wartime metal pressures forced a dramatic change to steel. When it comes to history and condition, The Philadelphia Mint produced nearly 1 billion Lincoln cents in 1941, with an estimated survival of 15,000 coins in uncirculated condition. Out of 887 million coins, 15,000 survivors in uncirculated condition. That attrition rate is humbling, and it explains why gem-red examples of this date command prices that feel wildly disproportionate to the coin's production numbers. What you are looking for is a coin where Lincoln's hair shows each individual strand clearly defined, where the surfaces carry that original blazing copper brilliance without any toning, spotting, or oxidation, and where the wheat stalks on the reverse still present with the sharpness and clarity they had the moment they left the die. The background and composition of this coin sits at the intersection of tradition and history in a particularly meaningful way. Struck in 95% copper with 5% tin and zinc, weighing 3.11 grams and measuring 19 millimeters across, the 1941 Philadelphia cent carries Brenner's Lincoln portrait and Ironside's wheat stalk reverse in their pre-war form, before the extraordinary events of late 1941 would set in motion the metal changes that would transform American coinage within 2 years. Apart from regular pennies, the Philadelphia Mint also struck 21,100 proof pennies in 1941 for coin collectors, specially produced using polished dies resulting in a mirror-like matte finish with sharp, high-contrast details. Only 21,100 proofs out of 887 million regular strikes, a ratio that speaks to just how rare and precious these collector pieces truly are. Collector demand for the 1941 no-mint mark penny is genuinely exciting at every level of the market. Less than 20 cents will fetch you one in just about any of the moderately circulated grades, and Mint State 65 examples only cost around $5, making this one of the most accessible entry points in the entire pre-war wheat cent series for beginning collectors. But at the top of the market, the story changes dramatically. The 1941 double-die obverse error penny, whose value starts at $110 for a circulated piece with little wear, gives every collector who examines a 1941 Philadelphia cent a genuine reason to look carefully at the date, liberty, and "In God We Trust" for signs of doubling. And at the very summit of the regular business strike market, one 1941 Philadelphia penny graded at MS 66 sold for $8,280 in a 2011 auction, while the proof series reaches heights that most collectors find genuinely astonishing. The most expensive 1941 wheat penny specifically, a PR 67 red proof, sold for $28,200 at Heritage Auctions in 2013. $28,200 for a proof penny from 1941. For current market value on regular business strikes, a circulated 1941 Lincoln cent without a mint mark is typically worth around $50,000 to $180,000, while in uncirculated condition its value ranges from $331,000 to $455,000, climbing dramatically at gem grades with full red color. In superb gem condition, the same coin can fetch up to $720,000, representing one of the most dramatic value ranges in the entire late pre-war wheat cent series. For collectors, the most important tip with the 1941 Philadelphia cent is to always use a magnifying loupe when examining the obverse, because the double-die obverse error on this date is a genuine and documented variety that can turn a pocket change find into a coin worth $100 or more. The doubling appears on the date and the inscriptions, and while it requires careful examination to identify, the reward for finding it is immediate and satisfying. Beyond the error hunt, focus your collection energy on finding the brightest, most original red examples you can, and always submit coins that appear to be in gem condition to PCGS or NGC before selling, because the certification premium for a verified gem red 1941 Philadelphia cent is substantial. Now let's move on to our third coin, the 1942 no-mint mark Lincoln wheat penny. Our third coin today carries one of the most significant historical distinctions in the entire Lincoln wheat penny series, because the 1942 Philadelphia penny is the last of its kind. Not the last wheat penny, not the last copper penny, but the last Lincoln cent with a fully traditional pre-war production profile, the final year before everything about how American coins were made was forced to change by the demands of global war. The 1942 penny is a wartime Lincoln wheat cent struck in bronze before the U.S. switched to steel in 1943, and the coin's historical connection to World War II and its status as the last full year of bronze production add appeal for both beginners and advanced collectors. America entered the war in December 1941, and by 1942 the pressure to conserve copper for shell casings and military equipment was already building. The nickel had already been removed from the 5-cent piece for artillery needs. The Lincoln cents turn would come the following year, when the extraordinary decision was made to strike pennies from zinc-coated steel for the one and only time in American coinage history. But in 1942, production continued in the traditional bronze alloy, creating a coin that today carries the quiet but powerful distinction of being the final regular bronze Lincoln cent before the wartime interruption. The 1942 penny with no mint mark was struck in Philadelphia with a mintage of 657,796,000, making this the highest output of the three facilities that year and the most common of the 1942 varieties. Philadelphia had the biggest mintage by far at 657.8 million, yet its survival rate is the lowest of the three mints, which is a counterintuitive but important fact for collectors to understand. More coins were struck at Philadelphia, yet fewer survived in high grade, because Philadelphia's enormous production went almost entirely into immediate widespread circulation, while some Denver and San Francisco coins were saved in rolls or sets by collectors who sensed they might have value someday. In terms of history and condition, the 1942 Philadelphia cent benefits from generally good strike quality that makes cherry-picking for gems a rewarding exercise. Look for Lincoln's hair above the ear showing each strand clearly and individually defined, a cheekbone that retains its full sculptural contour, and wheat stalks where every individual grain reads crisply. The color story is, as always with copper coins, the most important factor at the top of the value scale. The copper color designations of red, red-brown, and brown represent the most critical value factor, with fully red examples commanding premiums that are sometimes 10 times or more above what an equivalent brown example would bring. The background and composition of this coin gives it a particularly poignant place in American numismatic history. The 1942 penny is composed of copper with a composition of 95% copper and 5% zinc, struck in the traditional bronze alloy that the Lincoln cent had used since its introduction in 1909. This is the final full year of that tradition before the steel penny experiment of 1943 temporarily interrupted it, and that gives every 1942 Philadelphia cent a quiet but real historical dignity. The Philadelphia Mint also produced proof versions of this coin in genuinely meaningful quantities for collectors. The Philadelphia Mint struck 32,600 proof Lincoln cents in 1942 with the standard brilliant finish used from 1936 through 1942, and those proof coins carry an additional distinction that makes them particularly precious. This was the final proof issue until production resumed in 1950, meaning the 1942 Philadelphia proof cent is the last proof Lincoln wheat penny struck for 8 consecutive years. The last of a tradition that would not resume until the Korean War era. That is a genuinely remarkable numismatic distinction. Collector demand for the 1942 no-mint mark penny is multi-layered and growing. The last full bronze year status draws historically minded collectors. The conditional rarity of gem red survivors drives competitive bidding at the top grades. The proof series, especially the cameo and deep cameo designations, attracts serious proof collectors who appreciate the last of type significance. And error hunters are energized by the documented doubled die obverse varieties on this date, with doubled die obverse DDO varieties worth $50 to $1,200 or more depending on the strength of the doubling and the coin's condition. For current market value, most circulated 1942 wheat pennies are worth about 20 cents to $1, while common uncirculated examples are often around $1 to $10 or more. At the gem grades in full red, a 1942 Philadelphia penny graded MS 68 red sold at heritage auctions for $3,960 in 2021. On the proof side, the record is extraordinary. The highest price recorded for a 1942 Lincoln cent proof red cameo is $17,625, achieved for a specimen encapsulated by NGC in 2014. $17,625 for a proof penny from the last full bronze year before the war changed everything. For collectors, The most important tip for the 1942 Philadelphia cent is to pay special attention to the proof series if your budget allows, because the cameo proofs are in a completely different kind of rare, with only a tiny fraction of the 32,600 proofs struck showing true cameo contrast. A 1942 proof cent with genuine cameo or deep cameo contrast, where Lincoln's portrait appears in brilliant frosted white relief against mirror-black fields, is one of the most beautiful and historically significant proof coins in the entire Lincoln wheat cent series, and it represents some of the best value in American numismatics relative to its historical importance. For business strikes, always examine the obverse carefully for double die varieties, and submit any coin that appears to be in gem red condition to PCGS or NGC immediately, because the 1942 Philadelphia cent's status as the last full bronze year gives it a narrative power that translates directly into collector premium at certified gem grades. And now, let's take a look at our fourth and final coin, the 1944 no-mint mark Lincoln wheat penny. We have arrived at our final coin, and this one carries a story so dramatic, so historically charged, and so numismatically extraordinary that we have saved it deliberately for last. The 1944 no-mint mark Lincoln wheat penny is in one sense the most common wheat cent ever struck at the Philadelphia Mint. In another sense, it contains within its story one of the most valuable and electrifying error coins in the entire history of American numismatics. Let's begin with the history, because it is extraordinary. Between our third coin and our fourth coin, something happened that transformed American coinage in a way that had never occurred before and has never occurred since. In 1943, with copper desperately needed for the shell casings and military equipment of a war being fought across two oceans, the United States Mint made the unprecedented decision to strike pennies from zinc-coated steel, the so-called steel penny, a coin that was immediately unpopular with the public because it looked too much like a dime, rusted easily, and simply felt wrong after decades of familiar copper cents. Then in 1944, the copper supply was replenished, and the mint returned to a bronze alloy. But the source of that copper carries one of the most poignant stories in American coinage history. National Archives records confirm that cartridge cases were delivered to the Philadelphia Mint and remelted, meaning the copper in the 1944 Philadelphia penny came directly from the spent shell casings of a war being fought on the beaches of Normandy, in the jungles of the Pacific, and across the deserts of North Africa. The metal that had been fired downrange in some of the most ferocious battles in human history was being transformed into the humble 1-cent coins that American families were using to buy groceries and newspapers. Every 1944 no-mint mark Lincoln wheat penny is a physical relic of World War II in the most literal and direct sense possible, a coin made from the metal of the war itself. Philadelphia struck 1,435,400,000 pennies without a mint mark in 1944, the largest output of any 1944 facility. 1,435,000,000 coins. It is the highest mintage of any Philadelphia Lincoln cent in the wheat cent era, a figure so large it supplied virtually every till, piggy bank, and coat pocket in the eastern United States simultaneously. And for most collectors, the 1944 Philadelphia cent is exactly what those numbers suggest. A common, affordable, and warmly historical entry-level wheat cent that tells a powerful wartime story at a very modest price. Standard copper specimens in circulated condition trade for 5 cents to 50 cents, while uncirculated examples range from $1 to $10 or more based on color. When it comes to condition, the recycled brass composition resulted in frequent lamination errors and planchet defects, making 1944 to 1946 cents a rich source of mint errors for collectors. This is a uniquely exciting feature of the shell case era cents, because the impurities and inconsistencies introduced by the recycled military brass created planchet flaws, lamination peeling, and surface variations that appear on no other wheat cents in quite the same way. A 1944 Philadelphia cent with a dramatic lamination error is a genuinely interesting and collectible piece that speaks directly to the wartime origins of the metal used to strike it. The background and composition of this final coin in today's video returns to the beloved 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc alloy that had defined the Lincoln cent since 1909, though with the slightly different character that comes from the shell case source of the copper. Victor David Brenner's Lincoln portrait graces the obverse with the familiar dignity that had made this design America's most beloved coin for 35 years, while Christopher Ironside's two wheat stalks on the reverse carry the agricultural symbolism that gave the entire series its nickname. As a Philadelphia coin, no mint mark appears beneath the date, a tradition that identified the nation's original mint going all the way back to the earliest years of American coinage. Now here is where the story of the 1944 no-mint mark Philadelphia penny reaches its most extraordinary and dramatic chapter, and it is a chapter that involves one of the rarest and most valuable coins in all of American numismatics. When the mint returned to bronze production in 1944, a tiny number of steel planchets, left over from the 1943 production, accidentally found their way into the hoppers alongside the new bronze blanks. The result was a handful of 1944 pennies struck on steel rather than bronze, error coins of breathtaking rarity that look almost identical to their bronze counterparts but weigh slightly less and are noticeably magnetic when tested with a magnet. The auction record for a 1944 steel cent from the Philadelphia Mint was $180,000, a figure that places this error coin among the most valuable Lincoln cents ever sold at any auction. Only about 25 to 30 examples are known to exist from the Philadelphia Mint, making each authenticated specimen genuinely irreplaceable. And the error story continues beyond the steel cent. The 1944 Philadelphia penny is also known for doubled die obverse varieties, lamination errors from the shell case alloy, and off-center strikes, all of which carry meaningful premiums for collectors who take the time to examine their coins carefully. Beyond the steel error, regular 1944 pennies can have smaller varieties that increase their value, with the doubled die obverse being one of the most common for this year, occurring when the die used to strike the coin has a doubled image that is transferred to the penny and visible under magnification on the date and inscriptions. For current market value on the standard bronze business strike, circulated examples are worth between 5 cents and 50 cents in typical worn grades, while gem red uncirculated examples can reach meaningful premiums at the top grades. An MS-67 RD coin from Philadelphia reaches $150 to $225 based on PCGS and NGC data, while the highest certified gem examples push into four figures for the finest known pieces. And for the steel error, the values begin where most coins' records end, with a specimen sold for $408,000 for an MS-66 example in 2021 via Heritage Auctions. The 1944 steel wheat pennies stand as the most valuable variety of the issue, with the Philadelphia no-mint mark steel cent alone carrying an auction record of $180,000 for an MS-64 example. For collectors, here are some genuinely exciting and practical tips for the 1944 no-mint mark penny. First and most importantly, always test any 1944 Philadelphia cent with a magnet immediately. A bronze 1944 cent is non-magnetic. A steel 1944 cent is magnetic, and if you find one that sticks to a magnet, you may be holding a coin worth tens of thousands of dollars. Second, examine every 1944 Philadelphia cent for lamination errors, since the shell case brass composition resulted in frequent lamination errors and planchet defects that make these particular errors both historically meaningful and genuinely collectible. Third, check the obverse carefully for double die varieties on the date and inscriptions, since these can add a meaningful premium to what would otherwise be a very common coin. And finally, appreciate this coin for the extraordinary historical document it truly is. A penny made from the metal of the most devastating war in human history, struck in quantities that supplied an entire nation's commerce, and carrying within its story both the humblest and the most spectacular numismatic possibilities in the entire wheat cent series. As we have seen today, these four Lincoln wheat pennies from 1940, 1941, 1942, and 1944 tell one of the most powerful and emotionally resonant stories in American numismatics, the story of a nation moving from the optimism of the pre-war years through the shock of global conflict, striking hundreds of millions of copper coins along the way, and producing in the process a small number of survivors and errors that today command prices ranging from a few cents to nearly $500,000. Whether you are just beginning your coin collecting journey or you have been hunting wheat cents for decades, These 4 Philadelphia dates offer something wonderful for every collector at every level, from the most affordable circulated pieces to some of the most dramatic and historically significant error coins in the entire Lincoln Cent series. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, please like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you never miss another exciting coin video from Rare CoinX PRO. Share it with your friends and fellow collectors, and we will see you in the next one. Happy collecting!